Alright, today I guess I'm going to show you how to do some of these XT150 connectors. I've got a shitload of them over here. Notice they all look like crap because I haven't filed them yet. What I do basically is get the good solder joint on, and then you can actually just use a steel file to get the boogers off when you actually put on the housing. Because otherwise the housing obviously is never going to get around this solder booger. You can just use a steel file and take care of that. And you don't have to worry about trying to get a perfect solder. So it's actually really tricky to get a setup that it doesn't just dissipate the heat through the bullet. It's really annoying actually. So what I've done here is just some makeshift setup where if I was to put this directly into the vise, it would dissipate the heat straight into the vise, and it would be almost impossible to solder unless you had an industrial soldering iron or use a blowtorch. It's just stupid. So preferably you should find something with jagged teeth so that it doesn't conduct heat very much through it, but it does hold it. So yeah, let's get into it. This weird setup is literally just a vise onto some pliers, and it will definitely hold it. And one thing I will say is, do not, even with jagged teeth, do not put the very base into it, because it will dissipate the heat through the pliers. You have to put it toward the bottom. And that's very annoying on the, I don't have any up here, but the male bullet. The male bullet will bend with it, and it becomes kind of annoying. Oh, I do have one. These, because you can see it. You can already see I bent it because I had to do that. Then you just take like a puny screwdriver and put it apart, but it will move, and it's kind of annoying. Anyway, next step I would say is, I've got so many tools around here. There it is. So the first thing you want to do is just get a dab of solder onto the end of the wire so that it bonds easier. If you get a little bit of solder melted into the strands, it makes it easier to bond. And what I find easiest, I don't know if that's in the view of the camera, let me see. Yeah, it is, okay. I find it easiest to have some kind of ratchet tool, like this ratchet crimper, and it'll hold your wire for you. Because otherwise, you know, you gotta use a rubber band on pliers, that's a pain. So if you have a ratchet tool like that, it'll make your life a lot easier to hold it in place for you. Or you can use some kind of vise, that sounds more annoying, to be honest. But yeah, all you're doing is just getting a little bit of solder on the top and letting it melt into the strands. Make sure that the wire actually gets hot enough so that the solder melts to the wire. Don't just get a cold solder booger on top of the wire. You actually want it to melt into it a little bit. I know the camera probably won't see that very much, but it's good to get a corner into the middle of the strands and let it off. I think that might be a little too little in there. Maybe just a little bit more. And that should do it. Flat top a little bit. Cool. And this is another cool part about the ratcheting is you can kind of see where it would insert, and I can yet again get this ratcheting tool to hold my wire for me. So we'll leave that to the side. And at this step, let me adjust the camera. Essentially what you're going to do at this point is you're just going to make a small puddle at the bottom with molten solder. It's going to give off a lot of fumes. But you really need to make sure that that solder at the bottom is fully liquidized. And once you're sure of that, then you take that wire and your ratchet tool and you just dunk it in. Literally just dunk it in the wire, the liquid solder, and the weight of that ratchet tool is pushing it down in there for me. And at this point you can sneak in some more solder into the sides. And it will melt through the strands to that puddle at the bottom. You don't want to touch the iron and then move the solder away. Otherwise the solder is not going to melt. And it's going to be a little bit tricky. I got to get around the other side, get a view, go on the other side. Eventually, if you do it right, the whole edge will be able to melt solder because the whole wire is hot, which is exactly what you want. Just gonna get some solder onto the back side here. The whole thing should be able to melt solder. It's a little tricky though. Seems like I don't have enough solder on this side. There we go. There we go. Perfect. Cool. I don't want to make you don't want to add too much because then you can have a ginormous mess and that's annoying to file off. But at this point, it looks like it's pretty filled and you just let her off. There we go. Zoom out now, I suppose. And careful when you let off the ratchet tool if you're using that. There we go. Off with the vise. It's definitely going to be very hot. But there we go. That is, obviously we'll file that booger off, but it is filled with solder and definitely bonded. And when you put the housing on, that's basically your pull test. I'm not going to put it on right now, but when you put this through, it has to go into those grooves and it requires you to pull really hard. That's your pull test. If it survives you putting on the housing at full force, then obviously you made a good solder joint. But yeah, I just felt like sharing this is how I'm currently doing it, because these can be really tricky, and you probably, if you're a DIYer, you're gonna have to have some kind of setup like this, some way to work around the heat dissipating through the bullet, because it can be very annoying.